All right. Welcome, folks, to the BrightID Weekly AMA. It is April 7th. We don't have a special guest today, but we have lots of special people because we always do. Welcome anyone to ask questions kind of about anything about BrightID. Feel free to do it spoken or write in the chat with questions, and we'll just go from there. Anyone have anything pressing to kick off with?
No, but I've been thinking a lot about universal faucets for some reason. So I wouldn't mind talking about that some.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what other people want to talk about.
Yeah, the core team folks can always talk about lots of things, but anyone that's not usually here, please let us know if you have anything you want to get into.
Hey guys, I've got a question. My name is Noak.
Oh, hey, no, hey, it's pretty quiet. I don't know if you can get me closer or something.
How about that?
A little better. I'll turn you up.
All right. So I've got, well, really one question, but I wanted to ask another thing first so I can phrase it more intelligently. And I don't know if you want to answer this one, but how does BrightID make money? Do you make money?
That's a great question. Yes, we do have a revenue model. So we are nonprofit. So I'll say that first of all, that we see ourselves as kind of like a global universal product, and we always prioritize inclusion over revenue. So if the choice comes down to, can we make more money by excluding some people? We'll always choose including people and apps and anything else that wants to join our ecosystem over making money. So we truly are a nonprofit. So we created a couple of years back, we created a revenue model. It was mostly, I guess, Philip and Eliza and I designed this revenue model that we thought could be sustainable in the long term and support our nonprofit model. And so the way it works, and there's a couple articles written on it, so I encourage you to go. They're back in our old forum, or sorry, our old blog, I guess you could say, which is on Medium. So if you look at BrightID's Medium, you can see there's 3 articles, I believe, on sponsorships and 1 on subscriptions. So sponsorships, in a nutshell, what they are, every app, but it doesn't have to be an app, but it usually is apps, can sponsor BrightID users, and say, okay, so every person in the BrightID system needs someone somewhere, usually an app, but it could be themselves or it could be a friend, to sponsor them and to pay. Currently, the cost of a sponsorship token is, I think last time I checked, it was 18 cents. But we kind of, we also sell, we have kind of like a minter that will mint new ones for $1. But right now you can get them for cheaper than that. So you should just buy them off of the exchanges. You shouldn't mint them for $1. That's too expensive for now. But in the future, maybe the price will settle around $1. We don't know. But anyways, the point of these sponsorships are that creates, as BrightID grows, it creates a revenue model that kind of grows with it. So as there's more apps and more users coming into the ecosystem, every new user brings, let's say, $1 in with them. And we think that should be enough to keep all the core functionality and have plenty for research and development and all of that. If for any size growth that we might reach, we think $1 per person should be, per lifetime, should be plenty. That's kind of our current thinking. So look up sponsorships, read about how that works. Right now, if you use BrightID, I think almost there's a couple exceptions, but almost every app has opted into the sponsorship model. So let's say Gitcoin is your first app that you use with BrightID. They've opted into the sponsorship model. So if you use Gitcoin and link it to your BrightID, and that's the first thing you've ever used with BrightID, they will, from their stash of sponsorship tokens that they've purchased, they will burn one of their sponsorship tokens on you. And that provided 18 cents worth of value to BrightID. So like I said, at this stage, it's not a lot of money and actually not even enough to support our core team, which is why we do things like ask for Gitcoin grants and do other things to raise funding for the core team. But in the future, it should support the core development, I think.
I just had two things about it. One is, right, the important, it's not the user that pays, because we thought that users would be in a bad position to pay that cost. Even if they had money, it's still like, they don't have that like particular token. So we thought applications is a better place to have that payment come from, because they're doing it thousands of times. It's easy for them. And when you go and get sponsored, almost everyone on BrightID has been sponsored, and most of them are unaware that it even happened. Like, you know, it pops up on your screen that, hey, you're being sponsored, you've been sponsored, but they didn't do anything other than go to link the application. So it's supposed to be easy for the user. I had another point, but I forgot it.
Oh, I was going to say, if you go to apps.brightid.org, and I'll type it in here. Actually, they don't do links on Zoom, so I can't make a clickable link. So I'll just say it rather than typing it. But apps.brightid.org, you can see it's kind of a leaderboard of which apps are sponsoring the most users. And with our new apps, design for BrightID, right now there's an apps tab, and it's just kind of like this short list, and there's not much you can do to sort or filter it. There's already been quite a bit of work done on the apps tab redesign in the BrightID app, and it looks a lot more like an app store in the next version that's coming out. So you can learn a lot more about each app, what it is, what it's about. You can see what verifications they want, because there's actually different types of verifications in BrightID. You can see what this app wants you to do to get verified. And yeah, and then you can sort and filter, and it'll do a better job of ranking them according to the default rank is how many users they're sponsoring. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like a popularity contest. That's kind of what one of the perks of sponsoring users is you get those eyeballs. And actually, it's starting to become pretty valuable. Like, we've had apps that come in and start using BrightID, and that becomes the majority of their user base is existing BrightID users, because they'll spin up their app and immediately 1,000 BrightID users, or we potentially send 10,000 BrightID users to a new app that starts using BrightID. So you get a lot of eyeballs on your app from being in the app store. So that's kind of a perk of sponsoring users.
Cool. And then you mentioned subscriptions as well. Is that different?
Yeah, so subscriptions. So I mentioned that sponsorships right now don't raise a lot of money. And so hold on. So sponsorships, like at the scale that we are right now, and the cost of the price of the sponsorship, that's not really enough to pay for our core team. So what we did as kind of like a fundraising effort is we said, okay, anyone who's willing to buy more than what they need of these sponsorships, we're gonna give you an amazing discount. Basically, if you're willing to stream them. So let's say you're willing to take your sponsorships, instead of taking them all right now, if you're willing to spread them out over 6 years, you can get them for 250 times cheaper. So a massive discount. So we sold a bunch of those, and there's actually potentially millions of sponsorships that could come if people choose to activate those subscriptions. It could result in millions of sponsorships being generated for those apps. So curiously, I would say that most purchasers of those subscriptions have not activated them, which is kind of good for BrightID, because that means that we don't have that I guess you could say sell pressure on the sponsorship tokens, because there's not this massive number of sponsorships being generated from subscriptions yet, because people haven't activated them yet. But those do exist. They were sold. The details of that sale is you can find that in another article, also on sp.brightid.org. It talks about the sale that happened. It raised, am I getting the numbers right, Philip? I think it was about $500,000.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
And that has been what has funded BrightID up until now. That money is getting pretty slim at this point. So the ecosystem will need to figure out either how to greatly increase the number of people being sponsored or find some different kind of model. The community now has Bright Token as well, which is separate from the entity BMain, the original DAO that a bunch of people on this call are employed by. So hopefully the Bright community can help to figure out its own revenue model and then to support BrightID.
Yeah. And I want to, sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just like there's been a variety of ideas starting to be bandied about in Bright DAO of how Bright could become more valuable, more useful, such that it can be used to pay for things that are good for BrightID, the protocol.
Okay. Is it the same apps that bought the subscriptions, or is that other?
No, this is something very different. The Bright Token. So what we did with Bright Token was we so Bright Token, and if you want to learn more about if anyone wants to learn more about the difference between Bright DAO and BMain DAO and Bright Token and this sponsorship and subscriptions tokens, we actually had a pretty detailed discussion about it in the Gitcoin forums. If you look in the Gitcoin governance forums, they wanted to use Bright DAO as kind of like the study case of studying projects that were applying for Gitcoin grants that had tokens, and they wanted to look at Bright DAO and see, well, here's a project that launched a token. Should they still be able to ask for grant money from Gitcoin grants? What should we make the restrictions be regarding tokens? And so there's this big discussion about that, and we make a distinction between the new DAO, which is Bright DAO, and the old DAO, which is BMain DAO, and talking about how what we really wanted to greatly expand the community. So we have this core team, and we have people that have been working on BrightID for a long time, and kind of providing that core functionality, and that's been funded by BMain, and we talked about how that was funded. But then we wanted to expand because we wanted to bring in a lot more people working on BrightID, a lot more people working on kind of like tools that go with BrightID, people working on integrations with BrightID, all sorts of things that the community can dream up. We wanted to expand to be able to support all of that, and just get a whole bunch of new people involved with BrightID, and that was kind of the goal of Bright DAO and Bright Token. And I think that has succeeded. I think we've got a lot of new people working in BrightID now, working on related projects and getting paid in Bright tokens. And that was kind of the whole model. And so when we went to Gitcoin and we said, okay, we're still, here's our grant for this round, some people were like, wait a minute, you just launched a token, and this token has a market cap of like $2 million or whatever it is. Like, why do you still need money? And so we talked about, and we had this forum discussion about, well, there's like the greater ecosystem, and then there's the core team. And we haven't yet figured out how or if this new token, this Bright Token, can be used to cover all the needs of core team, or how that's going to work. Like that was not part of the agreement of launching Bright Token. There was no like written thing that said this must support core team. So we're still figuring that out, whether it can, whether it should, questions like that. So far, core team has not asked for any funds and not received any funds from Bright DAO, but that could change in the future. We'll see. We'll just see how that goes.
Thanks. So if you don't mind, I've got another question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
That's so if you look at Good Dollar, for example, they're open sourcing and they're actually hoping for people to copy their UX in an effort to make it more redundant and, you know, distributed, decentralized. If in case they would go down, there's someone else that would be able to pick up.
That's
Is
great.
that something that would be possible for you guys? Would you be interested in that? And would that even be possible to integrate with your revenue model? Would you be able
Yeah.
to allow others to sort of have a UX where you could sign up for BrightID, where you can manage your BrightID other than your app?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, we definitely envision that. We want other apps to be able to do all the functionality that the BrightID reference app does. I mean, we call it a reference app because we hope that other apps will come along and provide the same functionality. But we do realize that getting the second one out is not easy. I mean, you basically have to understand and duplicate what the core team has done with our app.
And our app is still under very active development. So like there's about to be a whole bunch of new functionality added to our application. And you know, if someone else is creating their own, like they would not know to do all that new functionality.
Right.
Definitely at some from the earliest days, we've wanted it to be true that multiple apps. There's no benefit to us, you know, monetary or anything like that for people using the reference app. There needed to be a user interface.
You still have
we
the
made
same
one
model, yeah.
If someone else makes another one, as long as it, you know, interacts nicely with the legacy one, great. People have talked about it and asked about it for a long time, but another tricky thing is like people they want to use BrightID, but they want to like abstract it away from the user, and that's tricky because it really is one BrightID at the core. Like you the user literally have a single BrightID. You can use it in all kinds of applications. If you've got multiple clients trying to use that one, it can get confusing. So like the reference app is it's like the manager that manages all the various accounts that you have with all these applications. And that's just kind of tricky for someone else to come in and play that role. But when someone figures it out, awesome.
All right.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly right, Philip. So you've got kind of two different types of client apps that could come in and do what BrightID does. One is the connection making app, and that you know, you can manage your connections, you can manage your linking to apps, you can like most of the functionality that the BrightID app does, you could replicate that in another app. And then there's a separate type of app, which is kind of this manager. And this is a new feature that we have since like a couple months ago. We have the ability to install BrightID on multiple devices. And so so let's say that you have BrightID operating on 3 devices, you need a way to be able to authorize new devices, revoke authorizations, and manage those authorizations. So so that's another kind of functionality. So like Philip said, if another app wants to come in and also take over that functionality, then we would welcome that as well. But I kind of see those as like two different things. You need like some number of apps or devices that you can use to make connections. So you could imagine that the connection making could be done. Let's say there's a social media app. Let's say that there's like District OX, which is kind of like a decentralized version of LinkedIn. Let's imagine that they want to include BrightID connection making. So they could integrate that piece in, and then there would still need to be this BrightID manager where you could say, okay, I authorize District OX to make connections on behalf of BrightID. And then that would be fine. So I think that would be ideal. You kind of have that separation. And then you could in the future, you could even have you could have a choice of managers. You could be like, okay, I want to use this app for managing my BrightID installations rather than this app. So there's kind of like those two separations. So I think the steps towards decentralization of all of this is first, we've already made it so that you can run it on multiple devices. That was a first step. Then next, we have to make it so that that we have a sort of like a manager, and we kind of downplay the role of BrightID, the BrightID reference app in doing all the functionality, that other apps kind of step up and then take that place. And then I guess the last step would be to allow multiple manager type apps. But definitely, I mean, that's definitely what we want. We don't want there to be, because right now it's kind of like, I see one of the things that core team is doing is trying to reduce our centralization bottlenecks. And one of the ones that I see is there's really only one way where you can completely use all the functionality of BrightID. And that's something that you have to go and get from the App Store. Or you can, if you're using Android, you can actually just download the APK from our website. But
and importantly, it's banned in France. And I'm sure it's true in other places, but it's banned in France because it uses some encryption libraries that are banned in the country, which is crazy because, you know, it's just code, but nonetheless, it is banned. So people living in France can't really get BrightID if they're on iOS.
Yeah, so we definitely want to have more options than what we've got. So we would like to, we're taking steps to facilitate that, because we want to make it really easy for other apps to step up and fill those different roles. The first one that's actually doing it, there's an app that we've talked about in here a few times called Aura, which is kind of like a toolbox for BrightID power users to help identify Sybils in the network and help verify users, honest users. So that Aura toolbox does use it. It has a sign in with BrightID that will not just link the app, but actually give the Aura app the ability to do the same things that you can do. So it's a web-based app, but you can do the same things that you do with the BrightID mobile app. So you can make connections, you can change connection levels and things like that from within the Aura app. So that's kind of like the first app that we know of that will allow you to do things like that. So we are definitely making steps in that direction.
And it has been tricky for that first app to figure out how to do those things, despite the fact that, you know, it's friends of the house doing it. But once it's done once, it'll be much easier for the next app to follow that same playbook to do it. Is
that app only doing the connection making, or are they also doing the managing in Aura?
It's in fact it's not even going to do the connection making right now. It's going to do some slightly different mechanics.
Yeah. So when Maddie talks about it, he says, well, it's just a different type of connection making. So what Aura allows you to do is, as you've probably noticed in BrightID, we have a very simple and kind of pared down selection of how you can rate the connections that you've made. You've got already known, just met, and suspicious, and then there's another kind of there's the recovery level as well, which has a different important function. So Aura doesn't do those, but it has different things that you can say about people that you're connected to. So it allows you to actually rate the honesty of the people that you're connecting to, which is different than saying how well you know someone. And then you can also give them what's known in Aura as energy, which is if someone else wants to be an Aura user and play the Aura game, they need energy to play the game. And it's kind of the resource that powers the game. And the way that it's given out is people, certain energy teams start with energy and then they allocate it. They choose who to allocate energy to. So those types of connections. So I would say there's still connections, but there are different kinds of connections than what you see in the regular BrightID app. And they're still cryptographically signed using your BrightID. So that same it uses the same basic functionality that connection making does in the BrightID app, but it's a different type of connection.
So is the cooking part of the app, is that open source on GitHub, or who can talk to start understanding what's required?
Sorry, I missed part of that. Did it sound to other people like you were breaking up?
Yeah, I heard a breakup.
Yeah, so could you ask that again?
Yeah, so I was wondering if the connection making part of the app, if it's already open sourced on GitHub, where can I find it, or who can I talk to understand it?
So of the BrightID app?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's all open source. In fact, there's even an API that would allow you to duplicate that functionality. So look on GitHub, just do a search for BrightID. It'll be the first repo that comes up. It's got the mobile front end, and then the back end is also open source. They're both under the ISC license, and that would be under BrightID Node. And then if you go to dev.brightid.org, there's API documentation, and you can duplicate all of the functionality. So you can run your own client, do everything that BrightID does. It's just I guess the missing pieces that we're still working with is, and we're starting to do this with Aura, is like working out like helping an app through actually implementing it and then documenting that process. And that's something we haven't done yet.
Cool. Thank you. That's all that I had.
Yeah, but if you do get to the point where you want to implement that, you please work closely with us, because we're very interested in having other apps implement our API. And so we would love to help you with that.
And it's really helpful when people outside of us actually want to do a specific thing, because it forces us to like meet your needs, their needs, which is kind of a different exercise than doing it ourselves.
Yeah,
and it's helpful. More gets done when people ask us. They're like,
Exactly.
"Here's what I want. How do I make it happen?" We're like, "Oh, okay. Here's how we solve your specific, real, actual use case, as opposed to theoretical things."
Yeah,
Right.
It helps us make a better API product. It helps us make better documentation. So yeah, please work with us. Don't try to do everything. I mean, you're welcome to do everything by yourself. You don't even have to tell us what you're doing. That's totally fine. But we would love to help you.
Cool. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the great questions. Did we have some in chat? Let me check. No, we don't.
No, I suppose. So Adam, you can post links in Zoom. You just have to put the HTTP.
Okay.
As long as you do that, it works. So what I usually just copy and paste them in. But if you as long as you have the preface, then it works.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the tip. Okay, do we have any other questions? Maybe we should talk about the universal faucet and some of the brainstorming we've been doing around that. Is that idea fleshed out enough that we can talk about it? I feel like maybe the gas faucet part is, maybe we can talk about some of our ruminations around the universal faucet, since this has been like 3 years in the making. What do you think? Should we talk about it? I'm excited about it, so.
Yeah, I mean, right. I'd say we could easily talk about the gas faucet, and we can flail around and talk about the universal faucet.
Yeah, we can do some hand wavy stuff around the universal faucet and maybe some more concrete stuff around the gas faucet. But yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So we've got a team of developers who wants to expand. If you've seen the ED faucet, so ID Chain has a gas token called the ED token. And that's one of the really elegant things. And actually one of the reasons why in the early days, when we were deciding where to put BrightID consensus making, and we had the options, like Matic came to us and said, hey, you should put it on Matic. And we had friends that were building stuff on XDAI chain. They said, maybe you should put on an XDAI chain. Actually, at that time, there wasn't even any DAOs or anything on XDAI chain. So it wasn't that great, attractive of a chain yet. But anyways, we were deciding what to do. And one of the reasons why we went with our own chain is because we realized, hey, we can use BrightID itself to give out the gas token in a gas faucet. And that's like a really nice onboarding process. To give an example, Songadaw uses snapshot voting on BrightID, and they were deciding, well, you know, we've got a bunch of voters who are like Ethereum newbies. How should we get them to be able to do snapshot voting? We've got to use some chain somewhere. And we decided to use ID chain because we can completely abstract that. They can get the gas tokens and use them without actually even ever seeing ID chain or even knowing what it is. So we thought that that was a good choice. So that's all they have to do is link their BrightID. And if you've been to the ED faucet, it's the same sort of thing. Like you just link your BrightID and you will get ED tokens sent to an address of your choosing. So that's really nice, but we want to extend that to other chains. We want other chains to have that. Other chains have, some of them have. I was annoyed the other day because like someone airdropped me some tokens. It wasn't worth very much. I think it ended up being worth like $8. But this is actually the old Swift Demand project. They launched a token, or like some of the community launched a version of Swift Demand on Binance Smart Chain, and so I got airdropped some tokens, and I wanted to play around with them, but I've never used Binance Smart Chain before, and I'm like, okay, are you serious? Like I've got to go to a centralized exchange somewhere and get these tokens. There's no faucet. Like I can't just get $1 worth of BNB or whatever the token is. So that I'm like that. So that killed it. That actually killed it for me. Like, okay, I guess I'm not going to do this. So we want other chains to be able to do the same thing that we're doing with ID chain, where you can say, okay, our community, we're willing to put in a stash of our gas tokens in here into this universal faucet, and so that they don't run out super fast because of Sybil attacks, we're going to use BrightID to guard that and then give out gas tokens to people for easier onboarding, kind of self onboarding. So anyways, I think that's a really awesome idea. And someone
11,000 people have gotten their free ED gas tokens.
Yeah.
Completely hands off. They simply went to a website, followed the instructions, linked their BrightID, and boom, they've been onboarded onto a new chain. And
yeah, so we want to replicate that for other chains and help them out with that. Yeah, but I think yeah, I mean, so if you've ever seen I think it's, what is it called, Chain Info or something, I forget what it's called, Chain Info or something. There's a site you can go to that has maybe 100 different chains, and you can just click on the button, because there's that IEP that came out. Like,
I think the name is chainlist.org.
Thank you, Chainlist, yes. So Chainlist, if you go to Chainlist, you can add a bunch, so you can use that fancy EIP that allows you to just click a button and add the network to MetaMask. So that's convenient. But imagine if you could also receive, because some of these are really cheap as far as gas, but you still need to get it somehow. Imagine if from that same interface, you could also get some gas tokens. That would be nice and convenient. So that's kind of how this universal gas faucet is being imagined. But so did I leave anything out from the gas part of it?
I mean, I would just say in general that right, one of the reasons that someone doesn't use a new chain is that they don't have the gas to get started. Or it's right, it's not part of it. It's not in their MetaMask. So we think very easily solve those two major onboarding problems for people. Another thing is sometimes really what you just want is a fresh address to take some action. There's been cases where it's like, hey, you have money on the chain, but you want a fresh address that's not tied, so you don't want to send gas to it. So with the gas faucet, one other thing you could do is just get a new fresh address with enough gas to do do something on that chain, which we think would be useful.
Yeah, and so we were talking, I was it yesterday or 2 days ago about how blind signatures I feel would be perfect for that scenario, because with BrightID blind signatures, when you get so basically it works on with BrightID nodes respecting this time frame. So they'll say something like, okay, you're allowed to register let's say once a week, and then your link expires, your verification link. So you're allowed to get a new verification once a week, and then your verification expires, and you can either automatically or manually get a new one. So imagine that you had a gas faucet that we figured out what the right amount is on a, if we had to allow for people to get gas up to once a week, you figure out what the right amount is. And then we say, okay, everyone's allowed if you need it. Like, we don't necessarily encourage it, because maybe you just need gas once, but you could get it up to once a week. And you can use blind signatures to register a new address every week. So you could theoretically every week have a fresh address with gas tokens and start using it on the chain, and they wouldn't be linked together. And because it's using blind signatures, the BrightID node never sees what address you're using. All it remembers is, okay, this BrightID user has not asked me to sign anything this week, so I'm going to go ahead and sign another one. I don't see what address I'm signing, but I'm signing that this new address, or this address, whatever address it might be, is authorized.
And that's one of the magic things about BrightID in general that I think a lot of people don't quite see, is that, right, when we provide that attestation of uniqueness, if done correctly, no one knows anything. The gas faucet simply knows, hey, I haven't given this person somewhere in the world that is verified gas this week. That's it. And then, so if you go 4 weeks in a row, you do 4 different addresses, no one at all, including us, the node operator, the blockchain, nobody knows that those 4 addresses are actually controlled by the same person.
Yep, that's pretty sweet. So
only the person that did it. They're the only one that knows.
Yeah, so I love that. You know, I love cryptography. It allows for cool stuff like that. Yeah, so that's really exciting about the faucet, and so that's kind of like an interesting transition. So first you talk about, okay, you think of a faucet as, I got just enough gas to get me started. That's kind of phase 1. Phase 2 is maybe, okay, I'm allowed to use this thing once a week and get some new gas tokens once a week, and I can use different addresses. That's kind of phase 2. And maybe phase 3 is where the ecosystems start thinking about, well, you know, maybe I've got another token. Maybe I've got a token on Gnosis chain. Now that I know that my users can get gas here, maybe this universal faucet can do more than just give out gas tokens. Maybe it can give out other tokens. Like, anyone could drop their tokens into a bucket and say, like, okay, we've got, for this week, we're going to assume that up to 1,000 users are going to get a share of these tokens that we're dropping in this weekly bucket, and we'll see who shows up and gets them. And that's really interesting. And so now you can have other projects that have other utilities besides gas, and giving users little bits of their token. So an example would be Song a Day again. So they're working on this cool way to rate the 5,000 or so songs that are in the repertoire. It's called Song Dust, but we need a way to get this song dust out to people. And so you could imagine the universal faucet, if it existed, that'd be a really easy way. You just say, okay, you know, click a button. I'm starting a new faucet for song dust, and I drop as much song dust as I want, and we were talking about how we could have like different lengths of distribution periods. So you could say, you know, this is 1 week only. I'm just going to drop this much in for this week. and up to 1,000 people can come and get song dust. Or you could say something like, I want this spread out over a year, so I'm gonna put a bunch of song dust in here, and then once a week, it's gonna split it into 52 chunks, and then once a week, it's gonna put some in each of those buckets, and there'll be a new bucket for the whole year. There'll be ways to keep coming back and or not keep coming back, for new people to come in and collect song dust. So anyways, I thought that if we can get there, but the first step, we realized through talking that the first step is the gas faucet has to be functional, because it can't be that you can't run into these edge cases where someone shows up to collect a token and they don't get enough gas to even use the network. Like, we can't run into weird scenarios like that. So if the gas token is, or the gas faucet is really giving everybody enough gas to use the network, then now you can start thinking about using other like other utility tokens that aren't gas tokens. And someone's echoing, so I'm going to mute somebody. Okay, cool. So anyways, did anyone who's involved in that have anything they want to add? Maybe, is there like a grand vision for Universal Faucet? I know that your original Universal Faucet was like even like bigger than that. Like, it had.
Yeah, I mean, given that we're doing this, right? This is an idea that struck me back in early 2018, before I knew anything, before I knew any of the challenges, and I just thought, hey, we've got these new crypto economic systems. We have this model that we could distribute value to anyone and everyone across the world. Hey, let's have a whole lot of things that come in and people can access them. And I drew a picture that I like to pull out every once in a while of this, and recently found a write-up describing it in sort of one page of how it could work. But basically, anyone in the world that had anything of value that they wanted to share with everyone should be able to sort of put it into the reservoir, and then the faucet would flow it out to all of the users. This was back before BrightID existed, but we knew there needed to be some mechanism that would distinguish who was eligible to claim from the faucet. It was originally written with a different identity Lego in that place. I called it a teacup. But now I view BrightID being that receptacle for everyone to take their fair share of the faucet.
Yeah, nice. Because yeah, my dream, or I guess my vision of what UBI is and how it comes into being has morphed over the last 3 years. And I think especially the last couple of years of airdrops have changed my mind about how that could function. And I realized that there's power in community tokens, in people holding their wealth in community tokens that they care about. And I think the future of money could very well be that you hold the tokens of the communities that you care about, and that's primarily your holdings. And then there's also kind of a UBI that factors into that says, okay, there's different projects trying to attract community members, and they're willing to give out their tokens, kind of like cast a net to see who they can bring into their community. And we've seen a lot of that happening, and that could become the UBI. It could be like, okay, I got some of A token, you got some of B token. I really want B token, you really want A token. Okay, we both got some, let's make a swap. And if someone needs to rent a house or buy food, they can use some of their tokens on that. And this could be how UBI gets started, just like a bunch of communities that have resources to give. So anyways, I think that's really cool, really powerful. And the universal faucet definitely fits into that. We just need to make something that allows any project that just wants to bootstrap just an easy way to do that, easy way to like cast that net and pull people in and give something of value, or any existing project that wants to give back. Let's say that Ethereum says, okay, you know, we've got this this fund that we're getting from maybe block rewards that we can use for UBI because because Ethereum is a public good, and we think that, you know, we want more people to be able to use it, so we want to distribute some as a UBI. So let's put some block rewards in a faucet. I think that's awesome. So I think having this tool, making it really easy, is just like great. So
and there's also, you know, people and organizations that would like to give, you know, people that have way more than they need, and they want to give it away. You know, there's billionaires that said, hey, I want to like give away all my money. Sam Bankman-Fried, right? He's exceptionally good at making money. You know, you may or may not agree with the way he does it, but you can't disagree that he's exceptionally good at it. And he said he wants to give it all away. Like he loves the game of it. But the dude drives like a Toyota Corolla. He's got billions of dollars. He doesn't want the trappings of wealth. He just likes beating everyone at the game of wealth accumulation. So how could he give that to the whole world? You need something like this.
Yep. I think that would be the absolute best way to do it, because otherwise you become a bottleneck. So I look at other people, you know, other billionaires, and they struggle with that. It's like, it's this burden of like, okay, now everybody's waiting on, all eyes are on me. Like the world has all these problems. And it's like that meme that's like, hey, richest person in the world, are you gonna solve world hunger? Well, not today. So it's like, you know, everyone's just waiting for this ultra rich person to like solve all the world's problems, but it's like, it's hard. You've got to like figure out how to do it. You've got to like vet all the different charities, and, you know, but imagine if instead of doing that, you're just like, okay, you know, I earned way more than I need. The simplest way is just to give it back to everybody. People know themselves how to solve their own problems. No one knows better than the person receiving how best to solve their own problems. So you just say, you know what? This is the easiest way to unburden myself of all the wealth I accumulated by being so good at this game that I'm playing. So yeah, I love it.
One of the early examples that got me focused on this was the coming of automation. And I think that over the course of the next few decades, a huge portion of the jobs that people do today are going to go away because robots and computers are going to do them more efficiently. And a whole lot of people won't have mission critical work to do in the way that they do. The machines will sort of will be capable of providing for humanity. And let's say you're a brilliant woman, you come out of college and you design the next like AI system that gets rid of 100 million jobs across the world. I mean, good for you, like you advanced humanity, but you just made millions of people lose their jobs. So now you feel really bad. But if you could give that back and give it to everybody, then like there's no sin, because humanity is better. Humanity is better off. Like driving a long haul, you know, truck, that's a really hard job. There's lots of reasons why that's not ideal for humanity to have anyone do that job. To take nothing away from the person that does that job, but like, dude, 20 years from now, they're not doing that job. The robots they're gonna do it. And what do we as a society do with the fact that all those people lost their job?
I love it. I love it. Like this makes me think of this is why I got into this in the first place. Like this is the future that I want. So I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I concur. That's what I'm trying to do as well. Beautiful vision.
Adam and I spent how many hundreds of hours having these discussions 2-3 years ago.
Oh yeah, we were so we were so excited. Like I remember the first time that we became aware of each other. I was like, I felt like so compelled to meet Philip that it was like I think you were up in Maine that 4th of July 3 years ago, and like we kept trying the connection. There were connection problems, but we were trying like 5 different times to connect on the phone because we were just like, man, we got to talk to each other. This is so exciting. And then I think we probably had like a 2 or 3 hour conversation.
I drove like 2 miles away from the cottage I was at to get a cell phone signal, and then I paced like 5 miles of walking around the parking lot as I talked to Adam the first time.
Yeah, so this stuff still excites me. So sometimes I feel like I get really deep in the weeds, so it's nice to come out and like remember why this stuff is so important to us.
I just found the 2 of you on Twitter and connected. You'll recognize me as Crypto BI for Basic Income.
Yay, love it. Yeah, I wish I was more active in Twitter. I'm still trying to work on that. Still trying to up my Twitter game. But yeah, thanks for following. Okay, we're getting close to an hour. Does anyone have another question? We might have time for one more. Okay, well, I appreciate everything that everybody has said, everything that everybody's working on. Like I love this community. I love the decentralization movement. I discovered it like 3 years ago. I discovered like how well it meshes with universal basic income and funding public goods. And I just love all this stuff, and I'm just so happy and feel really blessed to be a part of this. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. And I don't know, I think we might have, oh, okay, it's not next week, but pretty soon we're gonna have some really interesting guest speakers coming. So stay tuned and to the upcoming topics, and we'll be posting those on Twitter. So anyways, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Hey.